Ask you, where do you want to start?
Well, I think we should probably start this AI stuff that is starting to detonate around people's ears. I mean, lighting firecrackers out in the yard is fun. Having one go off right next to your ear, not so much. Uh, the NVIDIA just a few days ago reported earnings, and they had a blowout number. There is a curse that comes with being a public company, and that is your gross margin becomes, part of your financials. It's not hideable. One of the things I liked about being a privately held company when I was doing my internet thing was that nobody knew what it was. I knew what it was, but I sure didn't come out there and trumpet it. And the reason is that the basic law of business balance has always been that somewhere around 10% gross margin, a little higher is when you cross that threshold, you go higher than that, it becomes worth it for people to try to shoot at you. Okay, so when the average grocery store has an operating margin of 1.5%, all right? But 10% is always, in any line of business, has always been a threshold that once you cross it, you attract competition. And it's not really rocket science. It's that if I'm making 15, and somebody thinks they can undercut me by 2, they can severely damage or maybe even put me out of business. Okay, so they will shoot at me. When you get under 10%, it's not worth trying because the return on investment is not high enough. All right, so there still will be people that will do it, but that's kind of the rule. So NVIDIA comes out with crazy numbers as they have in terms of gross margin, as they have for a while. And a lot of people on social media were talking about, well, the receivables are going up, and and this is going up, and that's going up. And I wrote an article and I said, yeah, they are going up, but they're going up slower than sales are. That's actually good. Okay, I mean, if I've got a 50% increase in revenues and I got a 25% increase in receivables, that's an improvement in my operating condition. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. So, because obviously, if I'm selling more, I've got more outstanding, right, in the pipeline that hasn't been paid for yet. So I couldn't find anything in their quarterly report that made my eyebrows go up or the hair go up on the back of my neck. But that's the problem, is that their operating margin is up in the stratosphere. And so when you look at that and you look at the gross numbers, because you never know what kind of efficiency the company has internally. I mean, you have what they talk about. If you don't, but gross margin's gross margin. I mean, it is what it is. You paid this much to make the stuff, and then you sold it for X. And then everything else, of course, has to come out of that SG&A and all that. So I said, look, nobody runs around with 30, 40, 50% gross margins without people shooting at you. The only way you can prevent it is if you have a moat, such as patent protections. Problem that NVIDIA has is that the CUDA language that has become the basis for all this AI stuff was patented, was invented a hell of a long time ago. Patents are gone, all right? All the moat's gone. And you have a bunch of other companies that are large foundry producers that have the capacity to take a crack at these guys from that standpoint. All right? They have the ability to do it. So you have the Intels, you have the AMDs, you have the folks that are making Google's Tensor chips that are in their phones. You have Broadcom, you have TS. I mean, there's more than one NVIDIA class chip company out in the world. It's not just one. And I said, this is a problem. This is a very serious problem because their stock price is entirely predicated on that margin. If you draw competition and they undercut you, you are now going to be forced to cut the price of your products. Well, your margin comes in, your stock price is a levered version of your operating margin. And so when that happens, your stock price is going to go down, and not a little. This is a serious problem. I mean, I'm not saying it isn't good as long as it lasts. I'm just saying you are going to attract competitive pressure. and for good reason, simply because people can beat you around the ears with a broomstick. All right. Well, it didn't take very long. Google comes out and says, we're doing our own chips. F you. Now they are a major NVIDIA customer. And now you have other people that are looking at following suit. Oops. Now Google yesterday, shortly after saying this, got a nice big stock ramp because, oh boy, this is great. Well, no, actually, it's not great. You're not going to get a 50% margin out of your stuff either. You're not going to be able to do that because otherwise the other guys are still going to beat you. So guess what? Margins are going to come down. Right? So now, that pump basically came back off, or at least most of it. And NVIDIA, continues to trade, flat to negative. And that's just at the start. People have not gotten this through their head, what this really means. It means that this business of so-called AI chips is on its way to becoming commoditized. And as it becomes commoditized, the margins are going to come down to the level of any other commodity product, which is in the neighborhood of 10%. And all the inflated stock prices that have come out of this are all going to go back where they ought to be as a result of that. The other problem you have within the sector, and I've been talking about this for a long time, nobody has demonstrated anything in the large language model / hyperscale space, anything that approaches a profitable business from building those. No one. They're all projecting huge revenue numbers, but they have huge expense numbers. And by the way, they're all saying, well, this is going to grow 50% or 100% or 200%, every year for the next 5 years. Oh, really? The people that buy those services aren't going to buy them unless they make a profit buying and using them. Show me the profitable lines of business. IBM had something out, a white paper out not long ago that said basically, spend $1, get back 60 cents. Oh, that's nice. Okay, so every dollar you spend, you lit 40 cents of it on fire. Somehow that doesn't seem to be a winning business model for me. It's supposed to be spend $1, get back 250. Okay. I mean, that's how things have to work. Now, that doesn't mean that AI is worthless. It most certainly is not. I mean, as an example, on my forum, there's a search function that works using traditional database technology, not AI. But the way it works is because languages are all roots, have all roots to their words. So a word has a plural form, it has a singular form, it has a past participle form in many cases, it has all these different forms. But if you want to index those, the most efficient way to do it is to not do each of the individual forms because, by the way, it's all the same word. It's just used in a different context. What you want to do is actually index the stems and discard all the articles that nobody would search on. Who's going to search on the word the and actually want to return from the word the? Nobody. Okay? So and that's a huge percentage of the whole. So you take that, you stem all the words, that now compresses the database size that you're indexing on to something relatively small, and now you can use a traditional indexing mechanism, and you can do Boolean searches. The result of this is that across extremely large data sets, the search time is tiny. Okay, so just as an example, there's almost 4.25 million, about 4.25 million individual messages in general, and something on the order of 250,000 topic articles that are in that database, going back all the way to 2007. You can put in a Boolean search term and it will come back with the results across that entire thing in 0.2 of a second. Okay, essentially, from your perspective, that's instantaneous. You click the mouse and there it is. Okay, and it'll give you the most recent 100 matches, which is the way that I have it set up. And then if you want to, you can range select to get the 100 you want based upon the date in which they were put in. Now, that kind of efficiency, if I then put a weighting system on top of that, which is what AI systems are basically, I can get even more refined. So if I was to take, for example, my inventory flow within a business and apply an artificial intelligence model to it, which is simply that kind of an indexing plus a weighting system, yeah, I'll get actionable intelligence out of that. And I can buy a box right now that will sit on someone's desk. It's about 10 grand that will deliver that kind of capability in a small, medium, or large business. Well, that's not very expensive. That's, it's the price of what? Three higher end gaming computers, right? That's not a lot of money. Now, of course, I have to develop the model and, and the software that runs on it. But you're never going to make, you're selling one of those to a company. These hyperscale guys that are buying these things are buying, 25, 30, 50,000 of these processors at a time. Do you think you're going to sell the output of that, 50 times $10,000? Okay. And then, oh, by the way, you just bought that. You have to power it. Now you got the operating cost. Now you have the building to put it in, the air conditioning, the electricity.
The
And you
water,
have
the
to
water.
so, yeah, the cooling, everything else. By the way, how much in sales do you have to generate in order to be able to amortize that out and have it actually work? I don't see the revenue model for any of those services that actually works. Now, in the smaller scale, yes, there's a lot of applications, and it does work, and it's relational databases have been a business breakthrough in terms of what they give you access to. We were using them in MCS, and they gave me a great deal of actionable intelligence. Who's using what? How much utilization do we have here, there, whatever have you? It's a fabulous planning tool from a business perspective. And the the data that it got was directly real time from the people who were actually using the system. Okay, so okay, that's fine, and that there is a business in, but it's nowhere near what these guys are hyping. And so you've got two problems. One is that you have collapsing margins, which are going to continue. This isn't even realized yet. This is just announcements at this point. But the realization is going to come because you are commoditizing this industry. There is no moat to prevent people from shooting at you. It's very similar to what happened with IBM and Compaq in the early days of the PC. The first iteration of MCS, my company, we did exactly that. We figured out how to build compatible PCs that were cheaper than the Compaqs and the IBMs. They had some advantages in terms of performance because I was able to identify some components that were actually better and faster. We were able to sell them much cheaper. IBM and Compaq had outrageously high margins into the business channels. We were able to undercut them, and we could offer 4-hour on-site service because we had spares sitting in our office that were right there in Chicago. Okay, well, did we put IBM and Compaq out of the PC business? Well, of course not, but we were certainly part of what ultimately decimated their PC business, and it all went to the offshore Taiwanese and Japanese clones. And we were part of that. We were part of doing that, and we made a nice amount of money doing it too. Okay, but nobody in their right mind would ever try to suggest that we were making 40% on those machines. The whole reason we were able to do it was because we weren't. All right, well, guess what? That goes and whacks on the guys that are, because the only way that they can stay relevant and competitive in that marketplace is to cut the price. So, this is now starting. There are still going to be people out there that are going to tell you, oh, no, that's not the way it's going to go. This is different. It's special. No, it's not. Every line of technology throughout history has run the same way. And the moats that have been there by being first adopter, you can try to protect them with patents, but patents run out. And the CUDA language, this is a point that I made a long time ago, a few years back, is that I wasn't convinced that CUDA was going to be the only AI language. That's the one that runs on the NVIDIA chips. But that even if they won on that basis, that the fat margin problem was going to come back and bite them because their intellectual property protections on that were going to run out. And when they did, they were cooked. Okay, and that's not to say they're going out of business. They're not. But it is to say that their valuations are stupid, and that problem's going to go away. And so that's, we're seeing the beginnings of that. Now there's a lot of people that are going to try to argue otherwise. Don't be surprised if, the ramp job continues for a little while as a rotation from one name to another. You say, well, that means that Amazon doesn't have to pay as much for their AI resources, which they're using in their internal business. That means their valuation should go up. Yeah, Amazon's not the only guy out there. Walmart.com is going to have the same access at the lower price too. It seems to me they both sell merchandise through online stores, right? And Walmart's not exactly a small competitor either. So, I mean, but this is what happens as commoditization occurs, and it's to the benefit of the common person.
What are your thoughts on? You probably saw in the headlines that Michael Burry had shorted both NVIDIA and Palantir, and man, he's so cryptic with his posts on X. He put his...
Now he's trying to sell a newsletter, so no surprise.
Yeah, he started a Substack.
Yeah.
Today was supposed to be an announcement, wasn't today?
I don't know if it's Substack or if it's something else, but I saw something on X. I don't pay much attention to X anymore, but I saw something that he's now selling a fairly high dollar newsletter, which okay, that's fine. Hey, if you people want to pay that kind of money and get your insight, if they make money on it, then who's arguing, right? It's worth it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the part of the problem that he had running a hedge fund with client money is that clients, hedge funds these days are improperly named. They ought to be called high beta speculative funds because they don't hedge. Okay, a hedge fund is supposed to take risk out of a portfolio. And the problem with that, of course, is the only way to do it is when you buy insurance against a bad thing. You buy car insurance and you don't really want to wreck the car, right? But if you do, it protects you from taking a huge loss. You buy fire insurance on your house, not because you want a fire, okay? But every time you lose the bet, and you expect to lose the bet, you flush the money you paid for the insurance down the toilet. And so that's the way insurance works. So if you are truly hedging, and I put hedges on when I have positions open sometimes if I think that there's potential for serious risk. If I lose the bet, then I make less of a return. I give up some of the return because I have to pay the cost of the hedge. And that's money that's burnt. Okay, that's the way it works. They aren't hedge funds anymore. They're leveraged speculative bets that operate from a privileged capital position. We have one of the bad things that happened that came out of the crash in '08 is that we had the Dodd-Frank law, and but more importantly, we also had the Federal Reserve change. They stuck into the final bailout bill that passed the ability to set the reserve ratio for banks to 0. Now, I raised hell about it at the time, and I said this is a profoundly unsound thing. And they replaced that tool with haircuts and leverage ratios and types of asset qualifications. So a loan to one entity has a different risk weighting and therefore haircut in those computations than does a loan to another. And the problem with this kind of a scheme, instead of saying, okay, there's a flat 10% reserve ratio on loans that you have to maintain, it doesn't matter who the borrower is, it's 10%, is that what you end up doing is you screw all the smaller borrowers. Because the larger firm obviously has the much larger balance sheet. They have a much lower risk rating than does the entrepreneur. Over time, this is extremely destructive to progress in any economy. And the reason is that most job growth and most innovation actually comes out of small firms. And so what you're essentially doing is kneecapping those people. And then if you couple that with a refusal to enforce any kind of antitrust or trade dress theft, especially when you allow it to go on overseas across international boundaries, then you got real trouble, because now the little guy that invents something has essentially a 0 chance of getting it into the market without somebody either stealing it or just plain out competing him because he's paying 10% on his money and the guy who's competing with him is paying 2. All right, well, he can't make a profit doing that. All right, and so he gets forced to sell to the, to the Amazons or whoever. And this over time destroys innovation. But this is the world we live in today. And so, there you go. I mean, we're not going to turn that clock back short of an utter catastrophe. And there is essentially no way. I mean, I said at the time, this is a horrible thing to allow to have gone through Congress and actually end up codified into statute. But it did pass, and I mean, I think you'd have to have a revolution to get rid of it at this point because every single congressperson has been bought in regards to this. To put the reserve ratio back at 10% where it ought to be, I just don't see it happening.
So the other thing with AI, with these data centers that are being built all over the country, to your point, they're not making any money, but yet they're continuing to build these things. It's unbelievable.
Well, you'll do that. Well, you'll do that right up until the point that people start to default because, I mean, at some point you have to make money, right? And if you don't, then this is going to be an issue. So, I mean, is it tomorrow? Probably not. But how long do people continue to pour, basically pour money into a cash furnace and light it on fire? I have my doubts that this goes much further. I think, when you start talking about people going out there and blowing tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, somebody's going to say, where's the return on this investment? All right, and so far, I just don't see the return on the investment. So, the problem with the large language stuff and the open input, if you will, artificial thing, is that very small amounts of pollution in the input data destroy the integrity of the output. That's very hard to police, if not impossible.